At 6 a.m. on August 15th, Camille was barely a tropical storm. By 6 p.m., it was a Category 3 hurricane. 12 hours. Hurricane Camille didn't follow the rules. It didn't grow the way storms are supposed to grow, and it didn't warn anyone the way killer storms normally do. It appeared like a glitch in the atmosphere, fast, silent, and completely outside what meteorologists were trained to expect. When it first formed south of Cuba, Camille looked harmless. A messy swirl, disorganized, barely strong enough to earn a name. But then it tapped into a pocket of unusually warm Caribbean water, fuel that turned a weak tropical system into something far more dangerous. Within hours, the storm tightened, curled inward, stood up straight. Every satellite frame showed a storm learning to breathe. By the afternoon of August 15th, it exploded into a Category 3 to 115 miles per hour winds and pressure that seemed too low for a storm that size. Veteran forecasters stared at the numbers, looked away, then looked back, hoping something had glitched. Pressure falling too fast, wind speeds rising too cleanly, strength building too perfectly. Nothing about Camille was behaving normally, and it didn't stop. If your weather app showed tropical storm at breakfast and Category 5 by dinner, would you believe it? Most people on the Gulf Coast did, and they had no reason to. Storms weren't supposed to do this. By the following evening, a hurricane hunter crew flew into what they expected to be a powerful hurricane. What they found instead silenced the cockpit. 905 millibars. A number so low it belonged in scientific papers, not in the Gulf of Mexico. And the winds hadn't even caught up to that pressure yet. Camille was still growing. Forecasters couldn't keep up. Warnings were outdated the moment they were issued. And beneath it, the Gulf of Mexico had become a pressure cooker. Camille didn't just intensify fast. It intensified too fast for the physics forecasters understood in 1969. For most of August 15th, the Gulf looked calm on satellite images. Nothing suggested a storm about to break the rules. So it changed. Meteorologists would later piece it together. Everything Camille needed, heat, structure, airflow, aligned at the same moment. First came the water. That summer, the Gulf of Mexico was running unusually warm, perfect fuel for rapid strengthening. But heat alone wasn't enough. A storm also needs vertical room to grow. And over the next 2 days, an atmospheric shift happened almost no one noticed. The wind shear collapsed for roughly 48 hours. Normally, high-altitude winds act like a ceiling, tearing storms apart before they can rise. But when that ceiling disappeared, it was like opening the flue of a chimney, giving Camille a vertical runway to pull heat straight into its core. Satellite loops captured the transformation with brutal clarity. 1 hour the system looked messy and disorganized. The next, its eye had sharpened and its outflow bloomed symmetrically. To anyone watching the screens, it looked like someone had just flipped a switch. But the reports coming from offshore revealed the storm's true intensity. Workers on Gulf oil platforms realized something was wrong before the forecasters did. As the system passed south of them, the sky went dark, an unnatural, early afternoon blackness. The wind died. The ocean flattened until it looked like polished steel. Then the platform jolted. A blast of wind slammed the structure with such sudden force that crews thought a freighter had collided with it. They radioed the Coast Guard repeatedly, insisting, "Your reports are wrong. This storm is moving too fast, and it's too violent." While forecasters were still debating the numbers, Camille was accelerating into the most explosive 24 hours of its life. 24 hours. That's how long it took Camille to leap from a powerful hurricane to a statistical impossibility. On the afternoon of August 15th, Camille reached Category 3 to 115 miles per hour. Forecasters expected strengthening, yes, but gradual, predictable. What followed instead was a vertical climb no model of the era could track. 9 a.m., August 16th. A routine recon update hit the Miami office. The pressure had fallen again, faster, smoother, more precise than any natural storm should behave. Veterans stared at the chart, waiting for the wobble that never came. The numbers kept dropping faster than warnings could be updated. 12 p.m., August 16th. Another drop, even steeper. 3 separate systems, aircraft barometers, dropsondes, and buoy telemetry, showed the same result. Not glitches, not noise. A perfect decline. Forecasters found themselves asking, at what point does malfunction become reality? 5 p.m., August 16th. Camille reached Category 4 to 140 miles per hour. But the eye wasn't expanding like a typical intensifying storm. It was tightening, compacting, spinning harder with each rotation, like a top winding itself faster the closer it draws in. Overnight into August 17th, Offshore ships and platforms began radioing desperate reports. Cargo vessels described 30 to 40-foot waves appearing with almost no warning. Platform crews reported seas so violently churned they looked torn apart. These weren't exaggerations. They were early proof Camille had entered a phase almost no storm ever reaches. 6 a.m., August 17th. Hurricane hunters finally penetrated the core. Inside the eye, instruments recorded 905 millibars, already among the lowest pressures ever found in the Gulf. And Camille was still deepening. Wind instruments captured bursts approaching 190 miles per hour. For a moment, the cockpit went silent. It was the kind of reading pilots double-checked, not once or twice, but 3 times, before speaking. Meanwhile, Camille kept moving. 12 miles per hour, slow enough to maintain its intensity, fast enough that each new advisory trailed farther behind the truth. By the evening of August 17th, Camille approached the coast at Category 5, with pressure plunging toward 900 millibars. Most people below still thought they were preparing for a much weaker storm. And Camille was bringing something even deadlier than the wind. A storm surge that would arrive before the hurricane's core, flooding the coast while the eye was still miles offshore. Before the first hurricane-force wind touched the coast, the Gulf of Mexico began to rise. Not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly, like something lifting the entire ocean from beneath. Along the Mississippi and Louisiana shores, the air was strangely calm. Many residents believed they still had hours. No wind, no roar, nothing to warn what was already racing toward them. But offshore, gauges were already recording the first signs of catastrophe. The tide wasn't just rising, it was accelerating. 6 feet, 9 feet, 12, climbing with no wind to explain it. Camille's plunging pressure, dropping toward 900 millibars, had turned the northern Gulf into a massive vacuum, pulling water inward and then shoving it outward in a single direction, the Mississippi coastline. And that water was moving faster than the hurricane itself. 5:30 p.m., August 17th. Boats anchored near Bay St. Louis snapped free of their lines. Fishing crews trying to reach harbor radioed waves, stacking up like a moving cliff behind them. Many never made it home. 6 p.m. The sky dimmed, not from storm clouds, but from debris carried inland by the first gusts. Families who thought the storm was still hours away felt their walls shudder as a 3-story surge slammed into the coast ahead of the strongest winds. In Pass Christian, the water reached 24.6 feet, one of the highest storm surges ever measured in U.S. history. Entire neighborhoods disappeared before Category 5 conditions truly began. Concrete buildings meant to serve as emergency shelters were swallowed from the bottom up. Homes lifted from foundations and drifted inland like fragile rafts before being shattered by poles, trees, and fragments of other houses moving in the same deadly current. Offshore, instrument buoys near Shell oil platforms recorded individual waves hitting 75 feet, forces 3 times what those structures were designed to endure. If the platforms were being battered at that height, the coast never stood a chance. Survivors described a single horrifying sensation. The water didn't arrive. It erased everything. By the time Camille's eyewall neared land, the destruction was already complete. The storm's most violent winds were still offshore, yet thousands of families had already endured the deadliest part of the hurricane. And what happened next would reveal a deeper truth. All the models, all the rules, and every warning procedure used that night had been tragically, fundamentally wrong. By dawn, the Gulf Coast looked scraped clean, entire neighborhoods reduced to empty slabs. And when scientists sifted through the storm data, the truth hit with the force of a second disaster. Every assumption they had trusted was wrong. For decades, the hurricane rulebook had been simple. Wind causes damage. Pressure determines wind. Storm surge rises with wind speed. Camille tore those equations in half. Its surge, peaking at 24.6 feet in Pass Christian, had hit before the strongest winds, before the eyewall, before the storm's arrival even made sense on paper. Surge wasn't supposed to outrun the hurricane creating it. Yet Camille's did. Models failed so completely that researchers later said the storm behaved as if driven by a force we didn't have equations for. Offshore, the surprises only grew. Buoys near Shell oil platforms recorded waves nearing 75 feet, battering structures engineered for the most extreme conditions known. For the first time, engineers saw steel designed for worst-case scenarios buckle under forces that exceeded those limits by a factor of 3. Then came the pressure data. Camille's central pressure crashed toward 900 millibars, creating a short-lived vacuum powerful enough to pull water toward the eyewall and fling it shoreward like liquid shrapnel. Scientists had theoretical models for pressure-driven surge. but none believed an Atlantic storm could trigger it at this scale, until Camille proved them wrong. In the months that followed, the entire system had to be rebuilt. New pressure-driven surge models. New rapid intensification warnings based on a single clean pressure drop. New offshore engineering standards forcing oil platforms to be redesigned. New storm categories acknowledging threats once considered impossible. And these revisions laid the groundwork for ideas that would later evolve into what's now called the brown ocean theory. Proof that even a calm gulf could hide the energy for a monster. And buried at the center of it all was one brutal realization. Camille didn't break the rules. Camille revealed the rules had been wrong all along. In the decades after Camille, scientists hoped storms like it were once-in-a-century flukes, freaks of timing, temperature, and physics. But each decade since has delivered a new warning shot. One after another, they all pointed to the same conclusion. Camille wasn't an outlier. Camille was a preview. The first echo came in 2005. Katrina followed Camille's blueprint almost step for step. Warm Gulf, sudden intensification, explosive surge. The only difference was scale. Katrina dragged more ocean inland than any storm in U.S. history. Then came Harvey in 2017. Forecasters watched live as it intensified so fast that evacuation maps had to be redrawn mid-event. It wasn't supposed to happen in that basin. Harvey didn't care. By the 2020s, the pattern sharpened. Laura, Ida, Michael, Irma, storm after storm began repeating Camille's signature moves. Pressure drops that used to take 24 hours now happen in 5. Storms that should have weakened over land began strengthening instead. And in 2023, the closest modern mirror appeared. Hurricane Otis. A tropical storm that vaulted to Category 5 in under 12 hours before slamming into Acapulco. A Camille-level acceleration, but faster. The data proves this isn't chaos. It's trend. Since 2000, rapid intensification events have surged by 82%. And the fuel source? The northern Gulf today is 2 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than when Camille found its secret heat source. Storms crossing it accelerate like engines hitting open throttle, tapping into an energy reserve Camille barely tasted. That's the part most people miss. Camille didn't just rewrite the past. It rewrote the future. And the question now isn't whether another Camille will happen. The question is how many are already on the way. The Gulf holds its breath. We still don't know what the exhale looks like. Next time, Hurricane Otis, tropical storm to Cat 5 in under 12 hours. Should we cover it?